welcome in to Stop the Takes, football podcast focused on getting back to just talking ball. I'm Dakota, that's Austin, and today we're continuing our NFL draft reviews, division by division. Today's is on the AFC East. We wrapped up the NFC and AFC North, so check those videos out. We'll also be releasing some individual team videos for a select few, so be on the lookout for those. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the AFC East, starting with the Buffalo Bills. They drafted Maxwell Hairston, corner out of Kentucky, at the 30th pick at the back end of the first round. And then they clearly had a theme for their draft, which was defense, 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 drafting 5 straight defensive players to start this thing. What were your thoughts, Austin?
Overall, I really liked their draft, man. I did. Maxwell Harrison just felt like in baseball terms, just a double, just a solid player to draft at a position of need, because there was I think there was corners in this draft that had more upside than Harrison, but Harrison was the safest pick at that position of need for the Bills, and they needed to attack corner really badly. They're trying to beat the Chiefs, man, and that's one thing that they need someone to cover Xavier Worthy. So Maxwell Harrison's going to be that guy going forward. They drafted Elam a few years ago in the first round, and he just didn't work out. So they need to take another chance on a first round corner. And I mean, I kind of would have liked Siobhan Revel or Revel in this position, but again, Harrison is just the safe pick. He has no injury concerns. He's been durable. So overall, I like it. I think they nailed the first round.
Yeah, I think and he also ran the 4.28. So he's got that speed. He's really good in zone, so he fits the zone scheme that the Bills run, which matches with the later pick they made. We'll touch on him next, though, is Dorian Strong, who kind of went, lower than what his consensus was, corner out of Virginia Tech. He another guy that fits that zone scheme that the Bills run, a bit different from a size perspective. So you got like Maxwell Harrison, who's 5'11", and then you get Dorian in there, who's 6'1", a little bit more length at corner. But, adding, and they drafted also Jordan Hancock. So they clearly thought, we have swung and missed at corner. Kaiir Elam's gone. He's drafted a few years ago. He's already out of the building. So they definitely saw that corner was a need, and they attacked it pretty heavily.
Yeah, no doubt. And I really like that Dorian Strong pick, man, in the later rounds. I mean, I've talked about, I love when teams double up on positions, because it's just, I mean, not to say that both these guys can end up not being good players and not filling the need, but it just increases your chances to fill a position in need. And they really attacked the secondary, which I loved. And talking about Hancock real quick too. I mean, that could be a starter in the 5th round, man. It really could be. I actually really like Jordan Hancock, and he could end up, filling, possibly, if they ever want to replace why am I blanking on his name? The safety that almost passed away.
Oh, Damar Hamlin.
Yeah, Hamlin. If they want to possibly move off Hamlin at some point, he could replace Hamlin. So yeah, I really loved what they did in the secondary in this draft.
Perfect. Yeah, completely agree. And on the, then they also attacked the defensive line, which they were pretty aggressive at doing when they went and got TJ Sanders. So luckily they had a lot of draft capital, so they were able to kind of do a move up and not, have to go around without a pick. But they did they moved up in the 2nd round from 56 to 41 with the Bears, gave up the other 2nd round pick they had and a 4th, and then picked up a 3rd and 7th. So they did give up 2 2s technically to go get him. So they clearly wanted him on their team, wanted him to fill, some spots next to Ed Oliver on that D line. That's kind of lacking now. Add some depth at position 2 that's just important. And it's also obvious that they watched the Super Bowl. And I know when they lost to the Chiefs in the playoffs, it was they had a chance to win that game, and they had the Kincaid fiasco thing. But they saw the Eagles absolutely get after Mahomes, and I think that also played a hand in this, where they go, they get the corner and then they go DT, edge, DT, to just build that defensive line up.
Yeah, man. Speaking of how they attacked the secondary, they attacked defensive line even more. like you said, man, they have a very clear mission this offseason, and it's to stop Mahomes and the Chiefs, and they loaded up on the defense, dude. I mean, I loved what they did with the defensive line. They did give up a lot to draft TJ Sanders, which I just generally don't love trading up for non QBs. But dude, I mean, they already had a solid defensive line. It's not like they were
Yeah.
in desperate need of it. But they definitely needed the depth, and dude, they definitely got that. Landon Jackson in the third round. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people had him at the end of the first round, dude. To teams like the Lions, so that was just tremendous value. He could end up being a starter, and then I love the upside of Deion Walker, man. Just absolutely love the upside of him. It's a fourth round pick, so there's not a ton of risk in it, and he is a risky pick because he has the back issue coming out of Kentucky. He also was just inconsistent; like he didn't have
Yeah.
a ton of production, but he is a unique body type, man. Like, and there's plays on tape from him of him moving like a 250 pounder instead of a 350 pounder. So he's just very like a very unique defensive lineman, and I just love adding that to the rotation, man. Just more different unique body types. So I love what they did on the D line.
Yeah, love Landon Jackson, the value when they got him, because yeah, a couple of the mocks I had done, if he was once you ran out of all the edge rushers, it was like him and Scorton or whoever there at the end,
Yeah,
you'd throw them in there. Um, and yeah, Deion Walker is a really interesting prospect because I don't think his athleticism score because it's based on the actual combine, and he was doing it with the injury. He is 6'7", 330, and he does not play like that. Like you said, he is way more athletic than that in a sneaky way, but has the ability to plug holes and also pass rush a bit. So if he can come back from that injury, anything happening to your back's pretty serious. As a Titans fan, and what happened with Caleb Farley, which you hate to see, but if he can bounce back from that, I think he could immediately make an impact along that defensive line alongside Ed Oliver. Which now is again the depth they're adding that defensive line with Russo and signing Joey Bosa, who we'll shout out our check the mic guys who had the idea of throwing him in bubble wrap until the playoffs or till January because you don't want him to get hurt. So you got the depth now to be able to do something like that and limit snap counts and rotate guys, which is awesome. So yeah, big fan of what they did defensively here. And then, a couple other guys, they get a developmental tackle, a guy that could also come in. They love doing the personnel where you throw in an extra offensive lineman. Jackson Hawes, the tight end out of Georgia Tech, who's really good run blocker as well. Continue to do some of that 12 and 13 personnel where you can have Kincaid or Knox out there as a passing option, but him out there to run block. So, yeah, love what they did on the defensive side. And again, it's clear they had a mission, which is stop Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs.
Yeah, and like again, it's a draft I really like, so I don't have too many issues with it. But if there was one possible issue, I still think they have a need at wide receiver, man, and they didn't really attack it. They drafted Caden Prather in the 7th round, but I mean that's not a big investment. And I get it. Like, I understand where they're coming from, that they want to beef up the defense and whatnot, but I would have at least liked to see a little bit more investment a little bit earlier in this receiver class because even though it wasn't a strong receiver class at the top, it was pretty deep, and they just kind of missed out on that, even though they had quite a bit of picks. So I would have liked to see them attack a receiver, but overall, dude, I can't really complain with what they got because, I mean, kind of, I guess next thing we'll talk about is our favorite pick. If I had to pick a favorite pick, dude, Landon Jackson in the 3rd round. I think you got a potential first round talent in the 3rd round. So yeah, I loved that pick.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Like, obviously our lads isn't, the truth from a depth chart perspective. But they do have Caden Prather listed as 2nd string right now, which is not really what you want to see.
No,
they did sign a few guys, like Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer. But yeah, they're kind of in that same bucket as the Browns for me, where it's like I'm surprised they didn't draft a receiver higher with the depth and guys that they have. So that is an interesting one for me. I would probably agree with Landon, but to pick another one, I would probably go Dorian Strong then. The value of Dorian in the 6th round, I love that. A guy who can make an impact and play a little bit right now, fits their scheme, plays zone well, a little bit longer. So I like that fit for him.
On the Dorian Strong thing, Yeah, man, I love him in the 6th round. And also, that year they drafted Elam, they got their other starter in that same draft, if I'm not
Benford,
mistaken, in
yeah.
the later
Yeah.
rounds. So,
Late in like the 6th round, I think, Christian Benford, yeah.
exactly. So that worked out.
And then we'll take a look at the Renee Bugner composite score. We've been doing that for all the other ones as well. So he basically takes like a consensus of all of the grades that have been handed out and kind of composites it into one overall score. So we'll take a look at that for those for each team and what did Buffalo come in at, Austin.
So it looks like they came in tied for 17th,
Okay.
which I think that makes sense. Now, I'll say with these rankings, I just think, there's a lot of good drafts, man. So that's one
Yeah,
thing I'll keep
that's the thing.
reiterating. Like the 17th draft to me is still really good. Like I really liked Buffalo's draft, and I might even have them ahead of some of the teams that are ranked ahead of them. But overall, dude, I think it's a consensus pretty solid draft, and I think we agree with that.
Yeah, it would definitely comes back to again like a lot of teams just had solid drafts this year. So
Exactly.
um, all right. That is the Bills 2025 class. So let's move on to the Miami Dolphins. Um, they were mocked a tackle about at every mock for the most part. Still, corner started to go in there a little bit. So they shook things up a little bit and go Kenneth Grant, the other defensive tackle out of Michigan at pick 13, and then make a splash in the second round with a trade. But what did you think about that first round pick?
Uh, Listen, I mean, they could have went tackle. They could have went guard earlier. But I think they kind of got screwed by just how quickly the tackles went, man. I think if Kelvin Banks is there in the first round, they probably go Kelvin
Yeah,
Banks. So the offensive lineman just went quicker, and who knows? They could have went Tyler Booker if the Cowboys didn't take Tyler Booker
true.
sooner. Who knows with that? But I think honestly, I wouldn't have been mad if they reached on Josh Simmons in this spot just because it's such an acute need for the Dolphins. But Kenneth Grant's a good player, man. And I get taking the risk on Kenneth Grant because he is a bit of a risk. But I think he has a ton of upside. And that's still, listen, they still need interior defensive linemen. It's not like that's not a position of need. It definitely is. Ever since they lost Christian Watkins. So, yeah, they definitely need interior defensive linemen, and I think Grant could be an impact player.
Yeah, he's a bit another, massive dude, 6'4", 330. Not like overly athletic from a testing perspective, but another one of those that just plays a bit more athletic than he looks. Kind of shoots the gap like a 3 tech, but more of that like kind of nose tackle, one shade kind of player. I think it was interesting. I think the board falling the way it did is tough. Because it's also obvious with Connerly and Simmons going at the end of the first that there was a clear kind of gap right
Yeah.
between those tackles. But it is interesting though that they pass up on a Gray Zabel, for example, who goes just 5 picks later. So they must have either not valued him that high or just weren't they weren't drafting need. We thought they were going to definitely do that with a tackle. And I do think if Kelvin Banks is there, they probably take him. And to your point, we'll never know. But if Booker was there, they very well could have done that as well. So come out with a little bit of a different pick than we thought. But still a solid guy to go along that defensive line that they kind of need to rebuild now anyway, after, you know, Christian Wilkins being gone now for a couple years. So kind of need to refill the middle of that defensive line. And always need depth, but I think he'll start pretty much immediately for them. And then they make the big move in the second round. So because they didn't get the offensive lineman at 13, they make an aggressive move in the second round to move from 48 to 37 to take Jonas Savayanea. And they give up a third and fourth round pick in doing it. They get a fifth in return, but it made it where they then did not pick again until the fifth round.
Yeah, interesting move. I'm also glad you pronounced his last name for our listeners because there's no way I was getting that right. Yeah, I'm not surprised that they took an offensive lineman in this spot. I'm just very shocked at what they gave up to only come up 11 spots, man, for a team that's not very deep. This team is not in the position of let's say the Bills. Like the Bills could afford that luxury with TJ Sanders. The Dolphins could not, in my opinion, at least. So, and they definitely got a starter, so that's a plus. I mean, he's going to plug right into their offensive line and start day one. He also has a little bit of versatility to him as well, which
Right.
is nice for the Dolphins because they really they need the versatility. If we're being honest, they could use guard or tackle. So I don't necessarily hate the player. I just don't love giving up your third and fourth round picks to get that done. And then there's a massive gap in a draft that we felt like was pretty deep. Now they did pick a lot in the later rounds, or at least they picked twice in the seventh,
Hmm.
I guess, which is nice for them. But I think the sweet spot in this draft really was rounds like through five, and you only had you missed out on your third and fourth round pick because you really needed to go up and get a player. I didn't love it, man. And Tate Ratledge is right there on the board, right? I mean, Tate Ratledge dropped all the way down to the Lions with, I think, the second to last pick in the second round. So you could have just stuck to where you were at, took Tate Ratledge, pretty much similar player as far as the consensus ranking is concerned, and still had your third and fourth round pick.
Yeah, it's another one of those unfortunate where it seems like you're forcing your hand by you put yourself in a need before the draft, and they passed it up in the first round, and then basically said, "Well, we have to rectify this now." To your point, he does have some versatility. He has some time at tackle. He'll probably start immediately at guard, like right guard, take out Liam Eichenberg's spot, but both of their tackle spots are still kind of up in the air as well. Where they have Patrick Paul, who was a third round pick, I think, last year. And then the Austin Jackson, who's a first round pick from a few years back, who's never really been that great. So definitely can start right away, and then also add some depth at the tackle position to potentially compete there. And then, they have the gap. Don't pick again until the fifth. And they go three straight defensive players then at, Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle out of Maryland, Jason Marshall, corner out of Florida, and then Dante Trader Jr., safety out of Maryland. Ton of Maryland players getting drafted. So they add some defensive depth, a few guys that could probably come in and start competing for some jobs, especially as, the Jalen Ramsey thing is still kind of in the air. Don't know what's going to happen with him. A lot of trade rumors going on, so they definitely needed to add some depth there, but adding a few pieces on that defensive side of the ball.
It was pretty surprising that they didn't trade Ramsey during the draft. Kind of expected that. There wasn't a ton of player trades during the draft, and with a team without third and fourth round picks, you kind of would have possibly expected that. I don't know what his value's at though, so maybe he's not even worth that at this point. But I really like the Jordan Phillips pickup in the fifth round. I thought that's definitely worth the fifth round pick. Solid pass rusher and from the interior of the defensive line, and they still need depth there. I mean, right now he's slated to be Kenneth Grant's backup right now. So, I mean, that just kind of tells you where their defensive line is at. They definitely need the help in the interior defensive line, and they doubled up on it, which again, I love that. I love that strategy overall. And then, like you said, some of these guys in the secondary they took could definitely compete for jobs at some point. So yeah, overall, fifth round was solid for them. Just would have liked to see them draft more in that sweet spot in that third and fourth round.
Yeah, put themselves in a bit of a tough hole there. Add some guys on defense that have some interesting skill sets. Jason Marshall is 6'1", 201. He did have an injury. A lot of guys, man, this past season coming off of injuries, which is tough. And then things got a little interesting once they hit the sixth round. So they get Ollie Gordon, running back out of Oklahoma State, who this time last year, if you go look at mocks and top 50, 100 players, he was probably in there. People love hyping up the running backs a year out, but he just did not have the best season. He had a really, really, honestly, if he had come out, which I don't know what year he was, to be honest, but if he had come out after 23, he probably goes a lot higher. He had a huge season in 2023, 1,700 yards, 6.1 yards per attempt, but didn't really build off of that in 2024. And if anything, it felt like he kind of took a step back.
He did. Yeah, and it's interesting to me, man. The Dolphins feel like every single year they're going to draft a running back, dude. They come out of every single draft drafting a running back, which is kind of interesting. Don't know if they really needed to, but again, Ollie Gordon, like you said, he had a great season in 2023. Maybe he could bounce back to that level. So we'll see on that. And then in the seventh, Quinn Ewers, interesting pick in the seventh round, man. Just love taking quarterbacks and this time in the draft. And Quinn Ewers is an interesting player, dude. I mean, dealt with injuries all throughout college, was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Some people still believe he has a ton of upside potentially at the next level. And who knows with Tua's injury history, who knows if he'll ever get an opportunity to go play. Right now they have Zach Wilson as the backup, but you know, maybe Quinn Ewers will get a shot at some point. Either way, I like taking a chance on a guy like that in the 7th round.
I completely agree. I mean, he's probably the first quarterback I think of as like the TikTok generation quarterback. You know, when like high school recruits started to really get hyped up, you know, and we saw his
Yeah.
mullet when he was coming out and committed to Ohio State and everything at first. So he was all like, when people started doing all these hype videos for guys before they'd ever step foot on campus. And I mean, he played really well. It's crazy to see him go in the 7th, to be honest. Like, I feel like the skill set he has, and maybe it's kind of a Shedeur-esque thing where he just doesn't really have any elite traits necessarily, but he doesn't have the production that Shedeur did. But I do love the pick because the upside's clearly there. Former 5-star recruit. I mean, he played really well at Texas while he was healthy. You do point out he does have the injury concern, which is ironic because you're kind of drafting him because you're worried about that with Tua. So he definitely has the opportunity to help provide some solid backup to Tua there. So I do love the pick, but yeah, be interested to see if he gets an opportunity to play with Tua's health. But you got to at least start investing a little bit in the future if you're the Dolphins, because more so from a worry for the guy perspective of Tua's, how much longer should Tua be playing football is the real question there. So you got to get a guy behind him to develop.
I agree, man. I think that's probably why they brought in Zach Wilson as well. Kind of like a higher upside backup situation. People think he, since he left the Jets, he has upside now because everybody leaves the Jets and just gets better. So who knows what will happen with that. But yeah, I love Quinn in the 7th round, man. Love it.
Yeah, and then they round out the 7th with Zeke Biggers. Fantastic name out of Georgia Tech, another defensive tackle. High athleticism guy, a little bit lower on the production side. So developmental, kind of high upside from an athlete perspective. But that rounds out their class. And then actually, let me look at their UDFAs. Yeah, they loaded up at receiver with UDFAs. Forgot to touch on this with the Bills. I don't think they had any that stood out. But they signed 4 receivers as UDFAs. So loading up at that position, add some depth. And then I have to point this one out as Vols fans, but they signed John Campbell Jr.
Interesting.
So
Interesting
Dolphins
decision.
fans, you do not want that man on the field. So
don't expect him to play, Dolphins fans. I don't expect him to.
Do not. He will get cut. He's not going to make the roster. We'll be honest with you. Yeah. But anyway, what was your favorite pick for the Dolphins?
Interesting one. I think I'll save the one I think you'll go with. So I'll say Jordan Phillips, 5th round. I think he has a ton of upside. Good pass rusher, 5th round. And again, I love doubling up at the defensive interior position of need. So yeah, I'll go Jordan Phillips.
Solid. I'm going to go Quinn. Yeah, I'm going to go Quinn. I just love the value of quarterbacks in the 7th round. And a guy with his, it is interesting to see a dude with that much production at the Power 5 level go that late. A guy who's, again, looking at mock drafts this time last year, hopped up 1st round draft pick. And obviously things didn't go as well as would have hoped for him, but love the value of him in the 7th to plug in and be the backup. What does the composite say about the Dolphins?
They're not kind to the Dolphins, but that's okay. I think this isn't. I mean, again, we'll keep saying this, but they had a solid draft then, but they ranked 30th on this consensus ranking, tied for 30th. So right ahead of the Bengals, which we already reviewed the Bengals as well. But listen, I think a lot of people just didn't like the trade up and what they had to give up for that. That was kind of our biggest issue with it. But at the end of the day, dude, they plugged some pretty important positions of need. So,
yeah, I definitely think some people's grades, it's so hard because the grading isn't even consistent across those people they're compositing. But the people who probably gave them a lower grade do take into account draft capital and what you gave up. But giving up those picks and then going into 2026, they do have a handful. They have a couple 3rds and a couple 4ths, so they at least have some capital going into next year, which you always like to see. So that is the Dolphins 2025 class. So now we will move on to the New York Jets. So they were one of the wild cards at pick 7. A lot of people started to mock anything from edge to receiver to quarterback to tackle, and they end up going Ahmad Mimbu. after taking Olu Fashanu last year. So back-to-back years of trying to get the tackle situation figured out there. So they take him 7th overall. What were your thoughts on that?
I love the pick, man. It's the pick I would have made. So that means I like it. I mean, that means I like it. So I mean, yeah, dude. I just think it was the safe pick, dude. Mimbu was
Yeah.
a solid tackle prospect, and listen, Justin Fields needs a good offensive line. If they believe in at all in Justin Fields, which listen, he's not the future. He signed a $10 million a year contract. Like he's not the future, but he's the quarterback right now, and he needs a good offensive line around him. And I like going back to back tackles in the last 2 drafts, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
offensive line is so important. Like we're seeing that across the league. The best teams in the league have the best offensive line play in the league. Or just go look at the result of the Super Bowl, dude. The Chiefs lost that game in part because their tackle play was so poor, and the Eagles just took advantage of that. So listen, I love getting Mimbu. I think he was a safe pick in that situation, and it really just spoke to like they were out of blue chip players at that point, right? That there was no blue
Yeah.
chip players left on the board. All the receiver prospects had question marks. So why not just take the best tackle available?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think also I think bringing in Justin Fields may impact their how they approach things a little bit, where you have a guy who's prone to making offensive lines look worse with their ability to move. So being able to lock down the other tackle position, and he's an incredibly athletic. I think he was the number one athlete in terms of this tackle class from a production, like from a testing perspective, and then also has the production to back it up. High PFF grades in run blocking and pass blocking, so can do everything. He's immediately going to start and make a difference for them. So I love Justin Fields probably not your answer for the future, so they may not be even thinking about what matters for him. But having him and Fashanu as your 2 tackles for whoever your end up franchise quarterback be, whether you draft somebody next year or whatever, I think was a smart play by them. Um, and then they continue with offense in the second round and take Mason Taylor, who I think ended up being the third tight end off the board after the 2 in the first round, which they did get mock Tyler Warren there a little bit at 7. So it's obvious tight end was a thing they wanted. So they grab Mason Taylor there in the second round.
Yeah, dude, I like the Mason Taylor pick. I do. I think he's going to be solid, and like I like filling positions of need, and this is going to be a starter. He's going to plug in right away and start. And getting that in the second round is nice. And I don't think he has a ton of upside, but I would honestly, dude, I would much rather if you need a tackle, I would much rather get Mimbu in the top 10 and go in the turn and get your starting tight end instead of the other way around. Because listen, top 10 tackles are just much more likely to work out than second round tackles. Um, and also going back to the Mimbu, I just want to circle back to him real quick. One interesting thing about him, dude, is he was tackle 2 taken in the class, but a lot of people had him ranked above Will Campbell. And I think that's part of it. They could have possibly gotten the best tackle in the entire class. So I really liked their first 2 picks.
Yeah, I like on the same page with you in terms of you take the tackle in the top 10 and then you get the tight end later. And they get a guy who played a ton at LSU, but is still pretty young. So there's still a lot of opportunity for him to grow and get better and have the opportunity to pretty much start immediately for them at a position that they've kind of lacked for a while now.
Yeah.
And then they get Azarie Thomas, corner out of Florida State in the third. Another one of those corners. Just every time we talk about a corner, it's like they went lower than the consensus because this class was so unique. But some really good value with him there in the third, grabbing Azarie, who's a 6'2", more of a press guy. That long, kind of that new style of corner that's been happening since Richard Sherman. Really, the long, tall corner who has the opportunity to now since they lost DJ Reed to kind of plug in alongside Sauce there.
Yeah, that's an interesting secondary, dude. I mean, 2 guys, which I mean, Sauce hasn't played a ton of press man, but if they want to do that, they want to just have 2 guys that can just be out on islands and play press man coverage. I think they've got 2 really good players to do it, frankly. So, and again, another guy that will probably compete to start. And a great consensus value as well, dude. I think that was kind of the one of our themes in this draft was the value that teams got with this corner
Right.
class because all these corners just had certain question marks, and so the Jets kind of took advantage of that. So really liked him to the third. So yeah, dude. I mean, they really nailed their first three picks. Now after that, I don't actually I'll touch on their fourth round pick, Malachi Moore. I actually really liked that pick. I think again a guy that could possibly play for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a little lower on some boards. I remember doing like uh, the mock draft simulator for PFF, and Trevor had him in like the seventh round. I always picked him up in the seventh round, dude, because I was like, dude, this is a tremendous value. So, but I still think getting him in the fourth is also just solid.
Another one of those guys where like you're looking a year or two ago doing mock drafts, and it's an Alabama safety, so everybody's just like, this guy's probably gonna be a first round draft pick. So picking a guy up like that who has, that history of being in Alabama, always worth. Not didn't test super well athleticism wise, but I love the value of him in the fourth. And then they paired it with an interesting pick in the fourth, which was Arian Smith, wide receiver out of Georgia. Honestly, not too familiar with the name before this process because we, as Tennessee fans, watch Georgia. You're seeing Dominic Lovett. We saw Ladd last year, but high athlete guy, ran a 4.36. PFF had him really low on their board. I think it was a kind of consensus reach of when they took him. So a bit of a, betting on his athleticism, basically. They saw something they liked there and they took a shot on it. So trying to add a little speed to that offense.
Didn't love that pick. He has a drop issue, like a massive drop problem. He had 10 drops last year. He had like a 20% drop rate. I mean, that cannot play. That can't play. So that pick, you are betting on the upside in a big way because he doesn't know how to catch the ball, dude. And I mean, we've gotten burned in the past of like liking guys who get open, but they just can't catch. Like that's a pretty important part of being a receiver, man. Like it's what made Larry Fitzgerald great, right? He just never dropped passes. So that's, I mean, pretty crucial part of the position. And it's something that typically, like if a guy has an issue with it, just doesn't get better. Like you just know how to catch or you don't kind of deal. And he really doesn't. So, but I mean, fourth round pick, athleticism, like athletic guy. It's not like it's the worst pick in the world. I think there's probably better receivers left on the board.
Yeah.
I know that Stanford receiver. How do you say his last name?
Minor.
Yeah, the Titans got him in the fifth round, so he was available. I would have much rather had a guy like that in the fourth, but I mean, one bad pick out of their picks isn't so bad, I think. And who knows? He might work out with the athleticism.
Yeah, the drop part is interesting because, like, you only get so many when you draft a guy with speed. You probably only have a handful of moments during the season where you're going to have that shot to take, and if they drop 1/5 of them, and the other ones are contested, it's a little tough. So, and one thing that doesn't get talked about a ton, it gets talked about with quarterbacks all the time, but not receivers, especially, is the ball difference, right? Like the NFL ball is bigger than a college football, and that doesn't get talked about either. Exactly. So like when translating that to the NFL, like your hands, it's going to be more of a problem probably. So, but we'll see. I mean, he's got the athleticism. So Justin Fields has got a pretty good arm, so he can launch him a few deep balls, give him a couple chances.
They'd like Josh Allen, wouldn't they? Man, they would love to have Josh Allen. Sorry, Jets fans.
Yeah. And then they round out the fifth round with a linebacker out of Miami, another kind of athletic guy. And then Tyler Barron, double up with Miami there in the fifth round to wrap up their draft, former Vol. Decent value on him. He's more of a, not quite the athletic type. He's a bit bigger, 6'5", 250. Never played to me that like he was that athletic. Was always a bit more of a power guy. But they could use the edge depth though, for sure. So solid pickups there in the fifth round.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Barron's decently productive. So I don't know how they got in those sixth or seventh round picks. I don't know if that was part of a trade up or what, but overall, dude, this Jets draft was good to me. I mean, they got 3 to 4 potential starters, and I think they just, again, they didn't overthink their top 10 pick. I think they did the right thing with it. It doesn't mean Mimbu's guaranteed to be good. He's not the cleanest tackle prospect of all time, but I think they did the right thing with their first couple of picks, and I think that's what matters the most. So, yeah, solid draft for the Jets.
Yeah, I think they actually they came into it was 2/6, and I think they gave them up. They did trade up, I think, for Malachi Moore.
Hmm.
I think is when they traded up. So I think they gave up some there, and then they leave with some interesting capital. So they got like 4 6th round picks next year,
Dang.
a couple fourths, but then they have no third round. So I could see them trying to do some moves to potentially get a little bit more capital for a team that is still kind of now in a rebuild mode.
No
Um,
doubt.
yeah. So what was your favorite pick for the Jets?
I'm gonna go Mimbu in the first round, dude. I
All right.
think they could have messed this pick up. They really could have. They could have went for the flashy receiver play, or overdrafted a quarterback, or there's a lot, or tight end. They could have went tight end. I mean, I don't
True.
think a lot of people would have blamed them if they took Tyler Warren. A lot of people thought Tyler Warren was the best overall player available, but again, kind of reiterating what we said earlier, the top 10 tackle is just so much more likely to work out than the top 10 tight end. And the second round tackles don't work a lot. So I just like taking it in the order they did.
Yeah, I like that. I'd go Zaria then. I think getting a guy who can come in and potentially, a long corner that can come in and compete to start early on as a third round pick is solid value. So love that pick for them. What does Renee Bugner's composite say
Very solid
for the
draft
Jets?
for the Jets. They have him, they're ranked second highest in this division at 13 overall in
Okay.
the NFL. So really solid draft for them. And I agree with this one, man. I think they really nailed it.
I think one thing I would add that surprised me with this class when talking about the others that surprised, they did not take a quarterback.
That is
Um,
surprising.
that stood out to me, and a lot of these teams we thought would, they did. However, that was one of the UDFA's I wanted to point out. They had two very interesting ones, but still surprised they didn't draft one. So they are at least riding the Justin Fields thing out for this season for the next. Well, they signed him for 2 years, but we'll see. I think they can easily get out of the contract next year with the way they structured it. So the plan may just be Justin Fields draft a quarterback next year, but they get Brady Cook. So they signed Brady Cook, quarterback from Missouri, coming off an injury, started for like 3 years, I think, at Missouri. Played really well, led them to a New Year's Six bowl win over Ohio State a couple years ago, but got hurt this past season and missed some time, so he ended up going undrafted. So they get him in there to compete for a backup job, and then Donovan Edwards, running back from Michigan, NCAA
Cover
cover,
athlete.
yeah, cover athlete going
I knew you were
undrafted,
gonna go
five
there,
star.
dude. I knew you were
I
gonna go
know.
there.
But anyway, that'll be an interesting guy to throw in there because they're another team
Uh,
that I think people were expecting to add some running back depth as well that didn't.
True.
Um, so
Some people had them taking Genty. I mean,
yeah,
that
which
was
is
in
crazy to me.
consideration.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I
with
agree.
Brees and Braylon Allen who played really well. So, but they get Donovan in there to compete. Probably, to be honest, I think he can make the roster with a lot of the guys they have in there that are a bit older. But
Also think Brady Cook will make the roster. That is an interesting
yeah,
one. They
yeah,
probably a guy they would have considered drafting if they had a seventh round pick. That's maybe they didn't love the value of a quarterback before like the sixth or seventh round. But I will say, and I get it, the teams that didn't draft Shadur, I kind of get it. Like because you don't really want your backup kind of taking so much attention. But man, I would have loved the Jets draft if they would have drafted Shadur in the fourth or fifth round, like before the Browns got him. I just would have absolutely loved that because I think they probably should have taken a shot on a quarterback. And now again, they got Brady Cook, undrafted free agent, so they didn't have to spend any capital on that. But getting a guy like Shadur in the fourth round would have been really fascinating. So yeah, I get it. I get why they didn't, but at the same time, would have loved to see that.
yeah. And they got Tyrod Taylor on as a backup right now, and then they have Adrian Martinez is the other one signed right now, quarterback from Kansas State from last year. So could easily see him getting cut and them
Yeah.
keeping Brady Cook around. Um, so that wraps up the Jets 2025 class, which leads us with the New England Patriots, who drafted in volume, a
They sure
team that
did.
is trying to get on the rise. They found their franchise quarterback last year, we think, after losing Tom Brady. Since Brady's been gone, things have been a little bleak there. But their fourth pick was the one where we were waiting to see will they do the chalk move, and they did, which was smart in my opinion. So they take Will Campbell, tackle at LSU, the number one tackle for the consensus perspective at pick 4 to protect Drake May.
a little bleak since Brady is a little bit generous. I will say it's been probably pretty bleak for them since Brady. But yeah, I mean,
They enjoyed 6 Super Bowls, so
yeah, yeah,
they'll be
true.
fine.
They'll be fine. Um, but yeah, dude, Will Campbell again, kind of like the Jets, a similar analysis. They didn't really screw it up, and I think the Patriots, it was even more important they didn't screw this up because their offensive
Yeah.
line is atrocious, probably the worst in the NFL before what they did in the offseason. And drafting Will Campbell could fix that with one single pick, could completely fix arguably the most important position on the offensive line, which is left tackle. Um, so yeah, I love it, man. I think I agree. He's probably the best tackle in the class. I understand why they took it, despite the arm length questions and the wingspan questions. I think a lot of that's overblown to begin with, and specifically for Will Campbell, which he literally just got a bad measurement at the combine. So
Yeah.
I think they nailed the first round pick, man. They did. Will Campbell was the correct pick, and now can protect Drake May.
Yeah, and they needed to because he played really well last year with an offensive line. To your point, that was probably the worst in the NFL up there with like the Titans. So it's really hard to evaluate your young quarterback when he is getting half a second to throw every down. So had to protect him, which they continued doing in the third round with their 2/3. They ended up getting Jared Wilson in the third. They signed Garrett Bradbury to come in at center in the offseason, but they could draft Jared Wilson, who's center, but could easily plug him in at one of the guards. So made those moves on the offensive line. Got Morgan Moses, the journeyman, to play tackle too.
The great
So
Morgan
beefing up
Moses.
that offensive line was an absolute necessity.
Yeah, man, it was, and they attacked it hard, dude. And I think Jared Wilson will absolutely start. That's one of my favorite picks
Yeah,
in this draft. One of the reasons I really like this draft because they got a potential starting guard with their second, third round pick. So loved that pick, and the value they got it. I mean, just compared to all the other teams that were drafting interior offensive linemen, it feels like this is one of the few teams that didn't overpay for one, to be honest. They got Jared Wilson right around the place I would have loved to draft Jared Wilson. And this is like one of the few teams he would have started for as well. So I just really, really loved that pick. And did they completely fix the offensive line? No, but it's in a so much better situation. Now, a lot of that is going to be dependent on Will Campbell, obviously. I
yeah,
mean, a lot of it's going to be dependent on if he's good or not. But if he's good, man, this could all of a sudden turn a weakness into a strength of the team. So, love what they did on the offensive line.
yeah. They grabbed Marcus Bryant in the 7th round as well. It's kind of funny how many teams had like a top prospect, both LSU and Missouri, with Kai's top 7, but then also had other guys go. So they get Marcus Bryant out of Missouri to be a developmental guy for them as well, continue to add depth. And then the 2nd round, everybody thought they were going to take a running back. It was a matter of which one. They take Travion, the 3rd running back, off the board. Most people's consensus, I think, 3rd running back, and I think on the big board he was as well. Very, very interesting running back prospect. Out of Ohio State, has a pretty versatile skill set. He has some of those moments in games where, and against our Vols in the playoff game, he did it where he had one of those just one cut, I'm gone moments. Got the athleticism, 4.43 speed. He's 5'10", 202. He's got some power to him. And then the clip you sent, which you'll probably touch on, pass blocking.
Yes, man. Probably the best pass blocking running back in this draft class. Honestly, probably the most complete running back in this entire
Yeah,
draft class, man.
that's fair.
I just don't know where his holes are in his game. He just does everything really well. And yeah, it's an early 2nd round pick, but they probably got their starting running back of the future. Like I would not be surprised at all if he took over Steven's job pretty early on into the
Yeah.
season. So yeah, I love Travion as a prospect, and I love him on the Patriots, man. I just think it's a great pick. And if I want to complain a little bit, I could say, well, you could have taken a receiver there, and I think they probably still need a little bit more investment in receiver. But hey, they answered that question in the 3rd round with Kyle Williams. I think Kyle Williams is a guy that will come in and play immediately, will make an impact on this team immediately. And maybe that's why I like some of like I love the Patriots draft, I love the Browns draft, and maybe it's because like these bad teams are getting starters in the third round. But I also think Kyle Williams is good, like really good value in the third round. I really do. So because like this is probably like a second round level talent. So yeah, man, loved those offensive picks.
Yeah, it's one of those again. What would you rather have? They could have Luther Burden goes one pick after Travion at 39. So it's like, would you rather had Luther at 39 and then a running back in the third, or Travion and Kyle Williams? So maybe don't play those what if games. But I do completely agree. I love Kyle Williams. I think I've talked about it before in some of the other quick recap stuff we've done, but I think he's just one of the best separators in this class. And that is something that just translates so well to the NFL. From a projection perspective, pressure rate for edges is one of those things that typically translates well. And then separation, a thing that I think got undervalued in the NFL for a while, where like Quentin Johnston, for example, where we draft guys like him in the first that if you can't get open, it doesn't really matter how good you are, because you got to be able to get the ball in your hands. So love that for Drake May, getting a guy like him that can run those digs, run those routes to get him open, some crossers, and make the route running and get separation. So desperately needed a weapon for Drake May. And I love Kyle Williams there.
No doubt, dude. And it's also, we love themes, or at least I love themes for drafts. And very clear theme in this draft: when you spend 4 of your first 4 picks on offensive talent, they believe in their rookie quarterback, man. They believe in Drake May. They think they hit on him. And I agree with them. I think despite having possibly the worst situation out of the rookie quarterbacks last year, I think that's pretty clear that he was in the worst position. He looked amazing, dude. He looked really good despite having such a bad team around him. And so they're trying to fix that. And I think they did, man. I think they nailed these first 4 picks.
Yeah, completely agree. And then they take Craig Woodson, safety out of Cal. Fourth round, decent athlete. Could potentially, compete for some starting reps, at safety. Like the Joshua Farmer pick in the 4th round, defensive tackle out of Florida State. That was another one of those good value where he was a bit higher on the consensus. And then a fantastic pick in the 5th, which there may have been some chirping at coaches thing involved. We don't get into that. But Braden Swinson, the edge rusher at LSU, who was way higher on the consensus as well. Some people loved him and were even trying to hype him into the first before the draft. So go 3 straight defensive players with those next few picks in the 4th and 5th rounds.
I mean, Braden Swinson in the 5th round is fantastic value, man.
Love it.
A lot of people had him right around the 2nd round range, and you get him all the way in the 5th. This is a guy that could come in and play immediately for them. Had a 91.4 pass rush grade for PFF last year and a 22.1% pass rush win rate. I mean, those are insane numbers, dude. And the SEC, like this is not like a Mike Green situation where you're playing at Marshall and you have competition question marks. This is a LSU edge rusher, dude. I mean, he's playing the toughest competition in college football and posting these insane production numbers. Getting that in the 5th round, I cannot like the Patriots are just killed this draft, dude. I mean, this is one of the best drafts in the NFL, and Braden Swinson is a big part of that, dude. I mean, a guy that I think will make an impact on that defense immediately. I mean, they just signed Harold Landry. I think Braden Swinson is already better than Harold Landry, dude. Like the guy they just paid big money for. So like I could definitely see him coming in and starting immediately.
Yeah, and it's nice to get guys like that in there, that if after year 2 things aren't going great with Harold Landry, you've got the young guy now to kind of step in, because Patriots fans, Harold Landry is what he is. He's a cleanup guy. He's pressure rate's not great. Honestly, it's pretty low. So having a guy that's kind of the opposite of that, to your point, Austin, that has that high pressure rate, that's what you look for, and that projects pretty well. So he'll probably be an impact player pretty early on for that Pats defense. Rounding out the rest of their draft, they kind of went off the rails because they had so many picks, I guess. They drafted a kicker out of Miami in the 6th, Marcus Bryant, like I mentioned earlier. They drafted a long snapper in the 7th. I would love to know how many teams would have ever even considered drafting him. That is what it is. And then they had Mr. Irrelevant, Kobe Minor. Did. Yeah, corner out of Memphis to be Mr. Irrelevant to round out their class.
Now, they missed a pretty prime opportunity here, Dakota, to make a long snapper Mr.
Snapper
Irrelevant.
missed.
Like, come on, man. Like, first of all, Kobe Minor has no confidence because his own team took a long snapper before him. And second of all, who's going to take this long snapper before Mr. Irrelevant? No, the answer is no one was going to do that. So, like, yeah, thankfully they had so many picks, and like this doesn't really drop them as far as like a grade would be concerned. But if they didn't have a lot of picks, dude, drafting a long snapper is just a tear. And listen, I mean, this is a team that's rebuilding, dude. Like, just take a shot at any other position, dude. Any other position. So I won't harp on it too much, even though I already did. It's a 7th round pick. I get it, but there's no circumstances where I could have the best roster in the NFL and I still would not take a long snapper.
Character play. It's a locker room guy. It's a guy they want in their locker room. He's a hype man. He's the Brady. He's going to elevate everybody else's play, is what it is.
That's it.
Without him. And then they signed a handful of undrafted free agents. None that stand out a ton. Tight end from Alabama. I've heard of it. And a few receivers. One from Memphis, Eastern Washington, South Alabama. So, yeah, with that in mind, what was your favorite pick for the Patriots?
Has to be the long snapper, right? No, just kidding. Never. I'm going to leave Braden Swinson for you. I'm going to say Kyle Williams in the 3rd round. I think Kyle Williams could be, dude, he has a chance to be. I mean, if Stephon Diggs hasn't stayed healthy the last few years. If he doesn't stay healthy, I could see Kyle Williams being the most productive receiver in this offense next year, which says a lot for a 3rd round rookie. And like you said, separation is king in the NFL, dude. That's the most important aspect of receivers' games in the NFL. Everything else is really just not reliable as far as projecting on the next level, but separation is very reliable, and Kyle Williams is a great separator, so I'll go Kyle Williams in the 3rd round.
Love it. So I'm going to do a 2-parter because you shouted out Mimbu, so I'll shout out both LSU guys. Will Campbell at 4, just doing the thing. It's chalk, but taking Will Campbell to be your shut up about the arm length, shut up about the wingspan. Just take the guy who's a good football player to go be your left tackle, protect Drake May, and then yeah, Braden Swinson in the 5th. That value of a guy who could compete for edge reps day one for them. Again, with those things that project well with the pressure rate and everything, and the high PFF grade. So love the Braden Swinson value in the 5th round. Nailed the LSU guys. That's what they did. They nailed the LSU draft picks. So, all right, what does Renee have to say about this class?
Number 1, the number 1 draft class in the NFL. I really can't
with a long snapper and kicker.
Exactly, dude. And you know that definitely dropped them in a couple rankings just because like the principle of doing that. And who knows, maybe they just wanted to say, hey, we came away with like 8 starters in this draft, and part of that's getting our long snapper and kicker. But I really don't disagree with it. If you just take those picks out, I would have much rather used those on literally anything else. But if you take those picks out, I think they nailed this draft, dude. And such an important draft for the Patriots, man. This was a critical draft for Drake May's development, critical draft for new head coach Mike Vrabel. And I think they just killed it, dude. I really do. I think they came away with some extremely impactful players at extremely impactful positions.
It'll be one of those classes when you look back, do those and they're like, how many of their starters were? That's what it is. You'll see those two will elevate it by like 50% probably of how many of these guys are still around in 8 years. But they also leave with 10 picks in next year's draft as well. So have draft capital next year, and that's how you build. So you build a roster up with a rookie quarterback. So, and you have the capital to trade for guys, because now if this next season looks really good for the Patriots, you're in the position on the rookie QB deal to go spend some money on some guys, go trade for some guys, and go try to win something. So, love this draft for the Patriots and for Drake May and them kind of getting back on track in the post Brady era. So. Perfect. Well, that wraps up. That's the Patriots 2025 class, and that wraps up the AFC East. So next will be the NFC East, and then we'll keep our rounds going to the both South divisions and then out West. So keep an eye out for those. Please, like, share, subscribe, follow, do all those fun things. We really appreciate all the support. But until next time.
Thanks for talking ball with us.